My girlfriend gave me a 3-month trial period. During that time, I wasn't allowed to kiss her, touch her, check her phone, or even ask where she was going. But I had to reply to every text immediately, show up whenever she called, and most importantly, keep our relationship a secret. If I slipped up, even once, the trial was over. I endured it all for 3 months, until the guy she'd always secretly pined for, her childhood best friend, got married. That night, she looked at me and said, "You passed the test." I smiled. No need. I'm done playing. Later, she showed up in a wedding dress and confessed her love to me in front of everyone. That same night, she crawled into my bed, naked, uninvited. Anna called me while I was sitting vigil at my grandfather's wake. He raised me like a father, and I wanted to stay with him until the very end. But Anna's voice came sharp through the phone. "George, you have 15 minutes. Be at my place. Now." She knew exactly where I was, what I was doing. "There's a dead man lying there." "Are you seriously saying that's more important than someone who's still alive?" she snapped. 12 minutes left. "If you're not here, consider the trial failed." Then she hung up. What kind of emergency could possibly justify that? Still, I bowed low in front of my grandfather's casket and rushed out to hail a cab. I made it back to Anna's place just in time. She was on the stairs, panting and struggling under a pile of shopping bags. "I'm here," I said. I reached out to take the bags from her, but she pointed behind me. A delivery truck was parked down the street, stacked high with furniture. "Henry's moving in. The elevator's broken. Go help him." It turns out that this was all for Henry. Henry is Anna's childhood sweetheart. For the 3 years I pursued Anna, he was everywhere. It wasn't until Henry got engaged to his girlfriend that Anna finally agreed to date me. But even then, she made it clear, I was on a 3-month trial. At any point, if she wasn't satisfied, we were done. It was a one-sided deal, completely unfair. But I said yes, because I loved her. That night, I hauled a massive wardrobe up 5 flights of stairs. By the time I got it into Henry's new place, my back felt like it was on the verge of giving out. Anna smiled sweetly at Henry, as if this was all perfectly normal. "It's the least we can do," she said. "I'll treat you guys to dinner tomorrow," Henry offered. Anna agreed before he even finished the sentence. Later, I pulled her aside. "I want to go home tomorrow. It's my grandfather's cremation. I need to be there." Her face instantly soured. "George, are you really serious? Don't be ungrateful. He invited you to dinner, are you really going to refuse?" So the next day, while my grandfather's body turned to ash, I sat at a dinner table I didn't want to be at. Henry and his fiancée, Becky, raised their glasses, thanking everyone with glowing smiles. I remained silent and drank a large glass of wine in one gulp. Not long after, I was in the restroom, vomiting until I could barely stand. Anna didn't check on me. Not even once. From the other side of the door, I heard her voice. She was talking to her best friend, Emily. "Anna, if you don't even like George, why are you still with him?" "You don't get it," Anna said coolly, lighting a cigarette as she leaned against the wall. "If I were single, Henry would have to keep his distance. He wouldn't let me hang around like this." Emily paused. "So, what about George? Do you really feel nothing for him at all?" Anna laughed. "I gave him a 3-month trial because Henry's wedding is in 3 months. I figured, why not give it one last shot? If Henry turns me down, at least I'll have George to fall back on. Having someone to pick up the pieces isn't exactly a loss." She and Emily laughed like it was some brilliant scheme. But hearing them made my stomach twist with disgust. Ever since I started dating Anna, everything had to revolve around her, on her terms, her schedule, her rules. She refused to let me go public with our relationship. I hadn't seen my friends or family in weeks. And now I knew why, because in her eyes, I was nothing more than a backup plan. A placeholder while she chased after a childhood fantasy. There were still 8 days left before the trial period ended. But I have seen Anna's true colors. Still, I had once loved her deeply, so deeply that I'd gone all out planning a surprise proposal ceremony, scheduled for the final day of her ridiculous trial. That morning, the event coordinator texted me to confirm the venue. When I opened my phone, the first thing I saw was Henry's social media post. Choosing a wedding suit with the person I grew up with. The photo was of him and Anna, smiling, standing way too close. Out of habit, I opened Anna's page next. Blocked. She had restricted me from seeing her posts. She wouldn't let me go home to handle my grandfather's final affairs. And now she'd left me hanging here, while she was with Henry. I was nothing but a fool. A fool too blind to see what was right in front of me. I called the wedding planner and cancelled everything. Then I picked up my phone again and changed the dinner reservation. I'd originally booked a table for two at the Michelin-starred restaurant Anna had always wanted to try. I changed it to a private dining room and invited my friends instead, the ones I'd neglected while chasing a woman who never truly cared. Consider it an apology dinner, for the time I wasted, and the people I should have never pushed aside. We drank until we were all a little too loud, a little too honest, and a little too free. Laughter echoed through the private dining room, glasses clinked, and for the first time in a while, I felt like myself again. Then came the bill, and along with it, a scene I hadn't expected. Right outside the restaurant, Anna was causing a commotion. Anna is getting mad over a plate of foie gras. The server, calm and composed, tried to explain. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Our restaurant isn't part of the mall's promotion. Your voucher isn't valid here." "What do you mean it's not valid?" Anna snapped. "Do you want me to file a complaint against you?" Her voice was sharp enough to turn heads across the dining area. People started whispering. Realizing she was on shaky ground, Anna pulled out her phone. Moments later, my phone lit up. She barked, "George, come to me now, I'll only give you 3 minutes." But before I could say anything, she spotted me standing nearby, and completely lost it. "Unbelievable. I told you not to track me. How dare you follow me here?" "I didn't follow you," I said calmly. "Bullshit. What, you just happened to be dining here by coincidence? This place is expensive, you couldn't possibly afford it. 3 years together, and she never once tried to understand me. She never cared enough to even ask. Everything with Anna had always revolved around Henry. She had no idea I was pulling in 6 figures a month. To her, I was just a convenience. I opened my mouth to respond, but she recoiled, scrunching her nose like I smelled awful. "Ugh, you've been drinking? You know I hate the smell of alcohol. George, if you think you're still passing this test, think again." Then, just as quickly, she changed her tone. She waved her hand dismissively. "Forget it. Just pay for my dinner, and we'll call it even. Henry hasn't eaten yet, and I'm not in the mood to argue. It's for Henry again." I had loved her so deeply. And all the while, she was groveling for someone else's affection. What the hell was I still holding on to? She wasn't worth it. The server walked over, professional and polite. "Sir, your black card membership entitles you to a free portion of foie gras every month. Since she is your friend, we will also waive the cost of her foie gras." I gave a slight shake of my head. "That won't be necessary. I don't know her." I didn't even glance at Anna's stunned expression. I simply turned around and walked back into my private dining room without looking back. Later, as the alcohol wore off, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. A whisper of regret crept in. What if Anna really cut me off for good this time? But then, my phone buzzed. A message from Anna. She wanted to meet, just the two of us, for an overnight stay at a hotel. It was sudden. Unexpected. Even more surprising, she showed up alone. She slipped her arm through mine, her tone casual. "This place is kind of pricey, George. Let's just get one room, okay? One room. Just her and me." After all these years, it was the first time we'd be alone like this. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd come around. Maybe she'd finally realized what my love meant. Maybe she was choosing me after all. Even though the room cost nearly $9,000 a night, I paid without hesitation. Later that evening, I just changed into something more comfortable when she said she wasn't feeling well. She claimed she needed a massage and told me to go ahead and sleep first. I waited, but she never came back. Then, just past midnight, there was a knock at the door. Becky stood there, wrapped in a hotel blanket, panic etched across her face. "Have you seen Henry?" she asked, voice shaking. Something tightened in my chest. So Henry was here too. Becky peered into the room behind me. When she realized Anna wasn't there either, her expression shifted from anxious to terrified. We didn't alert the hotel staff. Instead, we searched through the night, floor by floor, hallway by hallway. Just before sunrise, I spotted them, Anna and Henry, standing together on a hill behind the resort. Like the rest of the world had disappeared around them. Anna pointed toward the rising sun, her voice filled with awe. "Look at that," she said softly. "It's beautiful." A moment later, her tone shifted to something bittersweet. "Once you're married, we won't be able to watch the sunrise and sunset together anymore." Henry chuckled and reached out to ruffle her hair. "Don't be silly. You'll always be my best friend. Besides, you've got George, I've got Becky. There's nothing inappropriate about us. Right?" That was their version of innocence, doing things under the guise of friendship that neither of their partners would ever accept. I started to step forward, my hands clenched at my sides, but Becky gently held me back. And in that moment, I saw it clearly, Becky had been giving just as much as I had. Maybe more. "Is it worth it?" I asked her quietly. She didn't hesitate. "Yes. If it means I get to marry him, then yes, it's worth everything." She could live with it. But I couldn't anymore. I left without saying goodbye. That same afternoon, I boarded a flight home for the holidays. When I landed and turned my phone back on, 16 missed calls from Anna lit up my screen. The last message she sent was short, only one line. But every word hit like a blade. "George, you failed your test." Then silence. She'd blocked me on every platform. Phone. Email. Social media. Everything. 6 days shy of the end of our so-called trial, and 3 years of devotion had come to nothing. I must have looked lost, because my mom reached over and touched my forehead. "George, what's going on with you? You've been acting strange. Is there a girl you like?" "There used to be. But not anymore." Anna had made me keep everything a secret from my family. Now, there was nothing left to hide. My mom didn't push. Instead, she simply smiled and said, "Let me introduce you to someone." She set me up on a casual coffee date. That weekend, I found myself sitting across from a girl with delicate features and a quiet presence. Her name was Selena. We'd barely exchanged a few polite words when my phone rang again. We'd barely exchanged a few words when my phone buzzed again. It was a video call, from Anna. She'd taken me off her block list. Her face appeared on the screen, as confident as ever. "George, I heard from Becky that something came up with your family, so I'll let it slide this time." I glanced at Selena, who was quietly sipping her water, pretend not to hear. Then Anna added, "You've got 5 minutes. Meet me at Nocturne." And just like that, she ended the call, no time for a response, no room for refusal. Selena set her glass down. "That's the girl you like, right? Were you planning to propose?" I stared at her, startled. "How did you?" She smiled faintly. "She was at my boutique a few days ago. Ordered a wedding dress. Said her boyfriend was going to propose." I froze. Was Anna really going to say yes? Had she finally decided to accept me? Was she actually planning to wear a wedding dress, for me? My heart wavered. I stood up abruptly, ready to leave. But Selena grabbed her purse and said gently, "Take me with you. I want to confirm her dress measurements anyway." We jumped into a cab, but by the time we reached Nocturne, the so-called 5 minutes had long passed. Anna was standing alone on the sidewalk, arms crossed, shoulders stiff, the city lights casting a lonely glow around her. I stepped toward her. "I'm here, Anna. Have you been drinking?" She turned, eyes rimmed with red. "George, you're an hour late." "I'm sorry, I..." A sharp slap cracked across my face. I staggered back slightly, stunned by the force. "Do you even understand what you've done?" she yelled. "Henry's gone. Becky took him home already. If you'd gotten here on time, he wouldn't have left with her." She was shaking now, her voice unraveling. "He was drunk, George. What if something happens to him? I'll never forgive you if something goes wrong." Anna collapsed into my arms, pounding her fists against my chest in a frenzy. "Why couldn't you have gotten here faster than Becky?" she cried. "Why, George? I worked so hard to get Henry alone while she was away, and you ruined everything." My cheek still burned from her slap, but what hurt more was the ache clawing at my chest. I looked down at her, at the tears, the desperation, the chaos in her eyes, and gently grabbed her shoulders. "Anna, they're getting married. If something was meant to happen between you two, it would have happened a long time ago. Can't you see that?" She covered her ears. "Shut up. Just shut up." Thankfully, Selena stepped in, pulling her away from me and ending the mess before it spiraled further. We called one of Anna's friends to take her home. No one said much after that. On the way back, Selena broke the silence. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "This has nothing to do with you. I am just deceiving myself." I let out a bitter laugh and turned to her. "Do you mind if I take a look at Anna's social media? She's had me blocked this whole time." Selena handed me her phone without hesitation. It was the first time I'd ever seen Anna's page. Over 1,300 posts. None of it was about me. Not one picture, not one mention, not even a trace that I'd ever been in her life. The pinned post at the top stopped me cold. It was a photo of her in a wedding dress, smiling into the distance. The caption read, "The day I confessed my love to you, I married you in my heart." And now I knew. That dress, the one she'd bought for my proposal, was never for me. It was for Henry. I stared at the screen for a moment longer, then quietly handed the phone back. 3 years of love. Of sacrifice. Of pretending we were something we never truly were. It was all a joke. And the punchline was me. The next day, I was sitting with my parents, watching a movie projected on the living room wall, when a message from Anna popped up on my phone. "George, my best friend told me you were with another woman last night. Who is she? Reply within 5 seconds, or we're over. 5. 4. 3. 2. George, answer me right now." Both my parents turned to look at me, eyebrows raised. My dad narrowed his eyes and reached for his slipper like it was a weapon of justice. "Did you do something to offend others?" "I didn't do anything." I protested, hands up in defense. Just as the words left my mouth, Anna's name lit up on the screen again, this time, a phone call. My dad pointed the slipper at me like a judge issuing a verdict. "Answer the phone." I had no choice. I picked up. Anna's voice came through, tight and trembling. "George, who was that woman you were with?" I took a breath and answered honestly. "She's someone my mom introduced to me. You didn't want me to tell anyone we were together, remember?" My parents assumed I was single. For the first time, Anna didn't have a snappy comeback. I continued, my voice steady. "I know how you feel about Henry. Let's stop dragging this out." I was about to hang up when her voice softened to a whisper. "But, the trial period isn't over yet. I haven't told you you can leave." I ended the call without another word. My parents exchanged a look and quietly slipped back into their bedroom, saying nothing. But the silence spoke volumes. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. It was Anna, standing on my front porch. The same woman who had once scolded me for even suggesting she meet my parents. The same woman who made it clear, twice, that she wanted no part of my family. And now, here she was, at my doorstep. She came in carrying a few gift bags, her eyes still puffy from crying. As soon as the door opened, she walked up and handed my mother a gift. "Hi. I'm George's girlfriend," she said with a strained smile. My parents were stunned, frozen mid-movement. Just as they were about to invite her in, I grabbed Anna by the wrist and pulled her outside. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. Anna's voice trembled, her eyes rimmed in red. "George. I came to meet your parents. Isn't that what couples do?" I stared at her, not sure which version of her I was talking to anymore. "Anna, stop pretending. You don't even like me. Let's just end this here. Please, stop showing up in my life." I pulled out my phone to call her a cab, but she quickly reached out and pressed her hand over mine. "Don't send me away. I had to fight just to get out of there." "Oh? Let me guess, is it about Henry again?" "No," she snapped, shaking her head. "Not this time. I came for you." I laughed. It was sharp, bitter, disbelieving. "That's the most ridiculous thing you've ever said." "I mean it," she insisted. "Just go, Anna. I don't want to see you anymore." I turned to leave, but she tugged gently at the hem of my coat. "Just for tonight, can I stay somewhere nearby?" she asked, her voice low. I didn't say anything. I simply walked her to a modest motel down the street. The room was small, barely enough space between the bed and the wall. We sat awkwardly beside each other, silence filling the cramped air. "You can rest," I said, standing up. "I'll head out." Anna lowered her gaze, her hands clenched in her lap. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "Will you stay with me tonight?" My heart stuttered. Anna, the same woman who spent years avoiding my touch, was now asking me to stay. She slowly slipped off her coat, then rolled down her tights, her movements hesitant but deliberate. Her bare shoulder brushed against my arm as she leaned closer. "You've always wanted to sleep with me, haven't you?" she murmured. "Well, tonight, I'm saying yes." The air left my lungs. For a moment, it felt like my body forgot how to move. Every part of me went still, like my entire bloodstream had frozen mid-flow. The girl I had loved for 3 years was now lying in front of me, her voice soft, her body inviting. What man wouldn't be tempted? But was I really about to make the same mistake all over again? While my mind wrestled with itself, Anna's hand slid toward me, fingertips brushing up the inside of my thigh. "Please, George, okay?" she whispered. I swallowed hard, then reached out, not in desire, but in clarity. I gently wrapped my fingers around her wrist. But that was the old me. In the next second, I gripped her wrist firmly and pushed her away. "Enough," I said coldly. I stood up and headed straight for the door. Behind me, Anna's voice broke through in a desperate cry. "George, I won't make a fuss about last night. I don't care who you were with. Let's just be okay again, please." I froze. Hearing those words, from her, was surreal. Almost laughable. But I kept walking. "George, are you really leaving me? Take one more step, and there's no going back. We'll be done forever." I looked down at my own feet, still locked in place. One step forward, and it would all be over. 3 years, gone with a single movement. "George, think this through." Anna's voice cracked with urgency. I shut the door behind me, and with it, I shut the door on everything that ever had to do with Anna. The next time I saw her was at Henry's wedding. She really was wearing a wedding dress. While Henry and Becky mingled with guests, smiling and laughing under strings of lights and soft music, Anna suddenly charged up onto the stage. She snatched the mic from the startled MC. Then she looked out at the crowd, eyes shining. "Hello everyone, I'm Anna. Today, I want to confess my love to a boy I've loved for a long time." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Every head turned. In an instant, Anna became the center of attention. Someone from the audience shouted, half laughing, half curious, "Who is it? Who are you confessing to?" Anna swallowed hard, gripping the microphone tighter. Her eyes scanned the crowd, then locked onto me. "George," she said, her voice clear and trembling. "I like you. Be with me." I froze, eyes wide. Me? When had I become the one she wanted to confess to? She stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "George. I was so stupid. It took me too long to realize how much you meant to me. Will you give me another chance?" The crowd erupted in cheers. "Say yes." Suddenly, Henry appeared at my side and, before I could react, practically hauled me onto the stage. Now Anna stood in front of me, her expression open, sincere, almost pleading. "George," she said softly. "Will you?" Once upon a time, I would have given anything to hear those words. But now, standing here, there was nothing left in me that stirred. I looked her in the eye and said gently, firmly, "I'm sorry. I won't." A hush swept across the room. I offered a polite nod to the guests below, then stepped down from the stage and walked straight out of the hall. Behind me, I heard her shout, "You're lying. George, you're still mad, right?" She chased after me, clutching the hem of her wedding dress, the fabric dragging behind her like a ghost of what could have been. "You love me, how could you say no?" I stopped and turned. "Let me ask you something, Anna," I said quietly. "That wedding dress, who was it really meant for?" "For you, of course," she blurted, eyes wide. I looked at her, unmoved. "The flower on your chest, it's Henry's favorite flower. I'm allergic to it." She faltered, reaching up quickly to remove the corsage and hide it behind her back. "You were planning to confess to him today, weren't you?" She bit her lip and shook her head. But her silence said everything. "So what if I used to love Henry?" Anna cried. "What matters is, I love you now. George, I don't believe you've really moved on. You couldn't have." But I was done playing her games. I glanced to the side, where Selena was quietly waiting to return the borrowed wedding dress. "Sorry," I said, loud enough for Anna to hear. "I have a girlfriend now." Then I wrapped my arm around Selena's shoulder and walked away with her. "Thank you," I whispered as we stepped into the parking lot. Selena didn't miss a beat. "Don't mention it." "But that wedding dress? 60 grand. You're paying for it." Later that night, I got a message, from Emily, Anna's best friend. She told me Anna cried all night after seeing me leave with someone else. She finally realized, Emily said. She's in love with you, George. She's been in love with you for a while. Henry was just something she couldn't let go of. Now, Anna was desperate to win me back. Emily said she was waiting in the place where we first met. Then she sent me a video, Anna's tear-streaked face filling the screen. George, you have 15 minutes to get here, she sobbed. If you don't bother ever coming again. Even my friends started pushing me toward her. Come on, they said. You've always loved her. You'll regret it if you don't go. They drove me to the plaza without waiting for my answer. And there she was. Anna, standing on the steps in front of the music fountain, wearing a wedding dress again, fragile, exposed, trembling in the cold wind. George, she said, her voice echoing across the square, I know you're here. There are 3 minutes left until the end of our trial. If you show up, I'll be yours, no conditions, no tests. She stood there beneath the lights, looking small and soft and heartbreakingly beautiful. My friend nudged me. Go to her. You've loved her so much, don't walk away now. Yeah. I had loved her. But where was she, when I needed her most? Anna raised her phone and began counting down aloud. 10. 9. Go already, one of my friends urged, growing anxious on my behalf. But just then, my phone buzzed. It was my alarm. The 3-month trial period was officially over. I exhaled slowly, like letting go of a heavy weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Game over. I said, calm and certain. My friends looked at me in surprise, then smiled. Let's go grab a drink. We headed to a bar, laughter filling the gaps where regret used to sit. After 3 rounds, the buzz settled in. That's when a woman stepped onto the small stage to sing. She wore a flowy dress that clung softly to her frame, her curly hair cascading loosely across her face. There was something effortlessly striking about her. When her set ended, a group of burly, drunk guys near the front started heckling her. As she stepped off the stage, one of them staggered over, demanding her number. She refused politely. He didn't take the hint. Before I even thought about it, I stood up and moved between them, shielding her. It was only then, face to face, that I realized who she was. Selena. She looked surprised, then relieved. Apparently, she could drink with the best of them. The moment she heard my trial period was officially over, she ordered a bottle and raised a glass. Drink up, she grinned. Tonight, it's on me. That's when I found out, Selena wasn't just the owner of a bridal boutique. She also owned the bar. We kept drinking, our conversation drifting between laughter and quiet glances. Somewhere between buzzed and drunk, the space between us disappeared. Then, suddenly, she leaned in close, eyes dancing with mischief. With the way you're looking right now, she said softly, your lips must be really good to kiss. I froze, caught completely off guard. And before I could respond, she smiled, and kissed me. Just a quick, playful brush of her lips against mine. Light. I blinked, stunned. She tilted her head and laughed. What? Was that your first kiss? I turned my head away, slightly embarrassed. It was. From the moment I'd met Anna, I'd never touched her without permission. Never crossed a line she didn't draw herself. No matter how many years passed, I'd only ever loved one girl. Until now. Selena nudged my arm playfully. "Wanna try something a little more exciting?" she whispered. Before I could ask what she meant, she grabbed my hand and led me out of the bar and into her bridal boutique. She motioned for me to sit on the velvet sofa, then disappeared behind the curtain of the fitting room. A few minutes later, she stepped out in a body-hugging mini dress, sleek, bold, undeniably stunning. "It's one of my own designs," she said with a wink. Never had the right occasion to wear it, until now. Selena walked toward me, heels clicking softly against the floor. When she stood in front of me, her voice dropped. "Zip me up?" She turned around and crouched slightly, her hands resting gently on my knees as she held her position. The closeness, the scent of her perfume, the shape of her figure, it all blurred together in the dim boutique lighting. My heart was racing. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was her energy, but something stirred. I reached out and pulled the zipper up slowly. As she stood, her heel slipped slightly and she fell against me, her arms catching around my shoulders. "George," she murmured, her breath warm against my skin, "let's give this a try." She reached up and started unfastening the buttons on my shirt, her fingers grazing my chest. And just like that, my mind snapped into clarity. I stood up, clumsily grabbing my coat, stumbling toward the door like I was running from a flame that burned too close. "Cab, please," I slurred to the driver when I flagged one down. "Just, get me home. Fast." The moment I sank into the back seat, sleep took over. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't at home. Anna was sitting beside me. She told me I'd passed out cold in the cab, and the driver had called the emergency contact listed on my phone, her name. She held my hand tightly. "George. I knew it. You still care about me." I started to speak, but she cut me off, lifting a slice of apple and pressing it gently to my lips. "I've changed," she said softly. "I want you to see that." Then, without warning, she stood and began slipping off her clothes. "Everything I used to push you away for, it's all yours now. I'm ready, George." Her eyes were red, swollen from crying, her voice thick with desperation. "Let's start over. Just you and me." Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, another voice cut through the air. A calm, firm interruption. "No," she said. "The person who came is Selina." She stormed into the room, eyes burning, and grabbed my hand back from Anna's. "Where did you go last night?" she snapped. "I looked everywhere for you." Now I had two women at my bedside, circling like opposing forces, and I honestly couldn't remember the last time my life had felt so utterly out of control. Anna, still seated beside me, straightened my blanket like she owned the space. "George, I'm already here," she said sweetly, deliberately. "Just ask her to leave. You need someone close to take care of you." "Close?" Selina scoffed. "We've already kissed. You want to talk about who's closer?" Her words hit like a slap, and Anna's composure cracked. Her eyes widened in disbelief, mouth slightly agape. "George," she shrieked. "How could you get involved with someone else this quickly?" I stared at her. Had she already forgotten the night she spent alone with Henry while we were still together? The way she chased after him while keeping me in the shadows? And now she was standing here accusing me? The chaos in the room swelled inside my chest like a storm. I'd had enough. I stood, grabbed my coat, and pushed them both out the door. I needed air. Space. Silence. But peace didn't last long. Later that day, another woman contacted me. It was Becky. She looked tired, worn down from too many sleepless nights, her usual polish dulled. We met at a quiet cafe, where she ordered a latte and stirred it without drinking. She spoke softly, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "After Anna's public confession to you, Henry changed." I stayed quiet, watching her carefully. "He's been different," she continued. "Distant. Distracted. Like he's chasing something he lost." She took a breath. "He's been leaving me out more and more. He stares at the gifts Anna once gave him like they're relics of a love he can't forget." Becky looked down at her cup, then back at me. "Last night, he got drunk again. And the first person he thought of, wasn't me." I didn't need her to say it. I already knew. "He tried to call Anna," she said finally. "Over and over again. He wanted her to come pick him up." A tight knot formed in my chest. Because while Henry was drunk and dialing her number, Anna was with me. She'd left him behind. For me. That should have meant something. That should have felt like a victory. But all I felt was the bitter taste of irony. Maybe this is what people mean when they say, sometimes, you don't realize what you had until it's gone. Only by then, it's already too late. In a daze, I suddenly felt Becky's hand slide over mine. "George," she said softly, "why don't we give it a try? Just think of it, as payback. For what they did to us." Her words were quiet, but they landed like a stone dropped into still water. I pulled my hand back like I'd touched something scalding. Across from me sat a woman whose eyes had lost their light, empty, tired, quietly breaking. And in that moment, I realized how lucky I was, to have walked away when I did. "Don't you hate Anna?" she asked, almost in disbelief. I shook my head slowly. What was the point of hate? That kind of energy could destroy you from the inside out. No, better to take that energy and give it to someone new. Someone who might actually know what to do with it. Shortly after, I filed for a 3-month leave from work, ironically, the same length as the trial period Anna once gave me. And when I finally stepped away from everything, I realized just how much could fit into 3 months, when your world no longer revolves around one person. I climbed a snow-covered mountain. And when I reached the summit, I looked out over the endless sky and understood, everyone has their own peak to conquer. We don't all have to chase the same view. I went bungee jumping. And in that one wild leap, I felt every tangle of love, resentment, regret, fall away like loose threads in the wind. I tried diving. There's no oxygen in the ocean's depths, but there's a kind of freedom there that makes you forget how much you relied on the surface. At the end of my journey, I visited my grandfather's grave. I laid a bouquet of flowers at his stone, the kind he used to grow in the backyard. He always taught me that to love someone is to do it wholeheartedly, just like he loved my grandmother. No matter how much my parents tried to convince him to leave the old house, he never did. That little home held their memories, and he stayed faithful to every one of them. However, in order to please Anna, I abandoned my grandfather who loved me the most. I wondered if he ever held it against me. Just then, a breeze swept through the cemetery. A few petals from the bouquet drifted down and landed gently in my hand. It felt like a reply, like he'd been waiting all along. Like he was still cheering me on, the way he used to when I was a kid, coming home from school, handing me a single flower and saying, "This one's for being brave. Grandpa. I'm sorry. I was too late." I wrapped my arms around the headstone, unable to hold back the tears anymore. I sobbed until my chest ached, until the sky began to dim and shadows stretched across the cemetery. I left just before nightfall. The moment I stepped off the plane, I saw her, Selena, waiting for me by her motorcycle, arms wide open. "George," she grinned, "welcome home." I pulled her into a hug, and it felt like grounding, like something steady after a long drift. I got on the back of her motorcycle, and as we drove down the road she told me all the things I had missed. Apparently, Anna had come looking for me, several times. Once, she was even found drunk and collapsed outside Selena's boutique, reeking of alcohol, desperate to know where I'd gone. "Did you tell her anything?" I asked. "Of course not," Selena replied with a sly smile. "If she'd found you, what would have happened to me?" She laughed, carefree and proud, and I realized then, love was always selfish. So why was I supposed to keep making space for people who never truly saw me? I reached into my suitcase and pulled out a small glass bottle. Selena took it, her brow furrowing. "What is this?" "It's air," I said with a soft smile. "From every place I visited. I wanted to breathe it again, with you." The look on her face was priceless. And the truth was, up on that mountain, when I was standing on the summit with the clouds at my feet, I thought of her. I knew she'd love that feeling just as much as I did. She smirked, tilting her head in that familiar, playful way. "See? You finally realized how great I am." I did. I leaned closer, my voice quiet, almost shy. "So, would you want to be?" But I didn't get to finish. I cupped her face in my hands and kissed her, full of certainty, without hesitation. "Selena," I whispered, "I like you. I want to be with you. Will you be my girlfriend?" She wrapped her arms around my neck and leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. "I do." Things with Selena moved fast, easy, natural, without any trial periods or conditions. Just two people who finally knew what they wanted, each other. Selena introduced me to her friends and family, proudly and without hesitation. She posted about us openly on social media, no secrecy, no hidden status, no trial periods. In this relationship, there were no games, no conditions. Just love. Just truth. Just us. When news of our engagement spread, Henry reached out, asking to take us out for dinner. He invited some mutual friends along, still with Becky by his side, still tangled up in messy dynamics, and somehow, Anna was still orbiting that chaos. I turned him down. Marriage should be about sincerity. And people who don't know what that means don't belong in our lives. Not long after, Becky got pregnant. Henry was ecstatic. He was by her side through every appointment, every checkup, every anxious moment leading up to the birth, never leaving her for a second. But when the baby arrived and the hospital revealed the blood type, everything unraveled. Becky had been unfaithful. The truth detonated like a bomb. Her family and Henry's got into a screaming match, fists flew, accusations raged. Their fragile marriage, stitched together by silence and appearances, finally shattered. And on the day Selena and I held our engagement party, Anna showed up uninvited. She strutted in with a man in a tailored suit on her arm, flashing a rehearsed smile. This is my boyfriend, she said casually. Looks like we both have someone now. Let's be good friends from here on out, okay? That old line again, good friends. I reached for Selena's hand and held it tightly, then pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. Our marriage license. No thanks, I said quietly but firmly. I've never needed more friends. What I needed was a partner. And I have her now. Selena is the only one I'll ever need. Behind me, I heard the echo of Anna's world collapsing, one last, hollow thud of the emotional house she built on pretense and pride. But we didn't look back. Together, Selena and I kept walking, upward, forward, toward something real. Toward something lasting. And from that moment on, every day became better than the one before.